It has its intended effect. It sparks Ian thinking. Maybe, just maybe, I am too damn good looking to play the bass. Welcome to 1001 Album Complaints, the show where lifelong friends, musicians, and guys whose wives are really tired of hearing about the evolution of stereo panning techniques get together to tell the backstory on the most influential albums of all time, as chronicled in Robert Dimery's book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. Now, if you don't know today's album super well or not at all, no worries. We're going to guide you through it with lots of song clips while we dive into the backstory of this artist and this album. And along the way, we will be breaking these songs down musically, culturally, spiritually, to offer you some hilarious and sage musical commentary. And at the end of all that, we're going to vote on whether this album is really a must-listen before you die. Now, look, I must warn you that we came here to learn, but mostly to laugh and have some fun. We're musicians ourselves, you see. We understand how difficult it is to make truly great art, and we come from a place of love and respect for the craft. But we also enjoy nitpicking and complaining, as the title of our show suggests. So, bottom line, there's no sacred cows here. We won't be treating this artist or this album with any particular reverence. You have been warned. I have a feeling there's going to be some fans of this album out there. My name is Rob. I've been playing, performing, and recording music since I was a wee lad, and I have formed some opinions in that time, let me tell you. So tonight, we will be discussing an album about which noted curmudgeonly wordsmith, Village Voice critic Robert Christgau wrote, What do they do that the Byrds and the Buffalo Springfield weren't doing better in 1967, and that 100 other indie bands don't do just as well now? They're postmodern English, filtering folk rock romanticism through Joy Division and Jesus and Mary Chain hyper romanticism, and in the end, they're surprisingly eclectic, not all that good at it, but eclectic.
Oh, man. Who could we possibly be talking about?
I'm speaking, of course, about the Stone Roses, debut self-titled album, The Stone Roses, from 1989. Let's get right into the music with a clip from the opening track on the album. This one is called I Want You. We're going to introduce our cast of complainers for the evening with a pithy, snarky, mean tweet-length review, and I am going to throw it first to Tom.
Thank you, Rob. You know, I have to confess, when I was a sophomore in high school, I decorated my book bag using whiteout and Sharpie markers with the names of cool bands that I liked. And I put the Stone Roses on there, despite the fact that I had never listened to them and didn't until well after I graduated.
Wow.
Looking back, I now realize I was totally missing out on the chance to put a much better band on my back.
Occupying valuable real estate. Oh, man.
Jeez. And using up valuable whiteout as well. All right, we're going to kick it next to Adam.
Hey, everybody, this is Adam, and my tweet is, no big swings, no chances taken. It's an indistinguishable pop 80s album that's playing it safe. Which is right up my alley. Go on, Stone Roses. Do your thing. It'll only be another 5 years until Oasis shows up and steals your sound.
Ooh. Ouch. Oh, shots fired in the Manchester streets. Okay, and we are going to kick it next to our very special guest, who's going to get a proper introduction after these tweet-length reviews. But first, I'd love to hear your mean tweet. Mike, take it away.
Well, here's the Stone Roses guide to being a proper Mancunian. Bucket hat. Check. Baggy jeans? Check. Even baggier sweatshirt? Check. Cool rhythm section, swirly guitar? Check. Extremely aloof frontman? Check. Arrest for vandalizing a record office? Check. Animus towards bandmates? Failures to capitalize on initial success? Wait years to release a second album and then fade away? Check. And check. Oh, wait. Mandatory reunion in the 2010s. And then really fade away. Check.
Wow, it's like you condensed my entire backstory of the episode into your tweet there, Mike. Thank you for that.
We're just going to go ahead and vote right now. All right, let's throw.
They're just Oasis 5 years before Oasis in everything, even the reunion.
They kind of are. And this is Rob here, and my tweet reads, "Arrogance and reverb, a recipe for international success." Sadly, these guys blew it worse than Man United against Liverpool in 2023 with that 7-0 defiling. Yes, that's right. I looked up Man U's worst defeat ever.
Wow. That's dedication, my friend.
Now listen, gents, this is no ordinary episode. This is the first of our listener request series for the summer. And we have with us real life listener himself, Mike from Phoenix. Mike, it is great to have you here.
I'm really stoked to be here, guys. It's really cool to be able to choose this album, and I'm glad to hear that you guys really didn't know about it, because I've been listening to this one since it came out. So I like to be able to share this one.
Excellent. We're going to get to those general impressions in a minute, but yeah, Mike, as you alluded to, it's a reminder to everyone listening that we staged a contest a little while back. And if you supported our own personal musical endeavors by buying a copy of the Beverly Crushers Enterprise album, we entered you into a raffle to pick an album for us to cover, Albinate or be damned. And after we picked Mike out of the hat, for the fun of it, we decided to invite him on the show as well. So yeah, Mike, I'd love to hear more in the general impressions that we're going to now get into. Tell us a little about why you chose this album, a little bit about what it means to you personally.
I've literally been listening to this album when it came out. I was just a young kid back in Fort Hood, Texas, and I had a radio station I listened to, KLBJ out of Austin. And they had one of those Sunday night alternative music. I think it was I Want to Be Adored was the first thing they played, and it just blew my head off right away. And I went to the record store in town immediately, got a copy, and I've just been listening to it ever since. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. I know it's not perfect. I know some people like to say it's the greatest of all time. It's not, but it's one of my favorites.
Let's get right into it. I'm going to roll in with my impressions. I had never heard this record before. I had never heard a note of this band. It's a name, of course, I had heard. I saw it on Tom's backpack, in middle school, but I had never listened to the music, and I enjoyed the week. It's fun, melodic rock and roll music. It's a throwback to the 60s, right? It's jangly. It's got some cheeky humor and cool kind of posturing, rock and roll posturing on it. I do think it is funny to revisit an album like this that is so revered, that is so high on so many people's lists, and you can't really feel the impact of it 35 years on. It just doesn't hit the same, partly because we're 35 years on, partly because we're American. Yeah, what did you think, Tom?
I liked it. I kind of agree with Adam's tweet in that it did feel a little safe. I like Ian Brown's voice, and I'm not trying to shit on him or anything like that, but I think there were two issues that I had with it. Number one, I never got the sense that he was pushing or reaching. And I like that. I know that's not necessary for every vocal performance to be good, but I got the sense that he was kind of playing it a little safe. And the other thing is that I really like it when there's a singer that doesn't play an instrument and they take advantage of that fully, where they're not tethered to the rhythm that the band is doing, and they can sort of be completely separate and write their own part that is very unique and plays around the rhythms and stuff. And I don't think that anything that he wrote melody-wise could not have been done by a guy also playing guitar and singing along to the song. And so that was a little bit of my complaints. Now, that being said, John Squire does amazing things on the guitar, and I really love his use of counter melodies. I feel like he gives the songs a really lush feel to them, and the rhythm section kicks absolute ass, and I have no complaints about that whatsoever.
Yeah,
the band's good. It's well-composed material, certainly. It just kind of didn't hit me like a freight train, like when you're reading these reviews about how people felt about it in 1989. It seems like they were feeling that way. But all in all, it's quite good. I thought many of these feel like classic 60s pop tunes, basically.
I filtered them through the lens of, so my go-to marker for the 90s is that movie So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Oh, yeah.
And I just if I think about Like if the aliens came down and said summarize 90s culture, I would give them that Mike Myers movie. So I was listening to this, and it was almost like every song could have been on the So I Married an Axe Murderer soundtrack. And I mean that to say that while it's not hugely looking forward, this was cut in 89. It was looking a couple years in the future, and a lot of that mid-90s kind of easy pop really sounds like this, with that kind of echoey, I guess it's a chorus with a little bit of delay guitar. Like the guitar tones on this album scream mid-90s to me. So I think these guys may have had a little bit of influence on that sound. So I approached it that way. Again, I'd never heard of it. I had never heard the album, but I was pleasantly surprised.
No, fair enough.
Rob and I actually played a show at Edinburgh Castle, which was used in that movie. They filmed the scene where they're all having a big family dinner is at a venue that Rob and I played at. And I always thought that was,
Oh, no way.
Oh, I don't think I ever realized that, Tom. Yeah, that makes sense now that you say it.
Yeah.
Nice, nice. Okay, well, back to the Stone Roses, though. Yeah, it's funny you said that it's forward-looking, Adam, because I kept thinking it was backward-looking. But I did get this strong soundtrack feel. I felt like I had heard these songs before, and I couldn't tell if it was just because they were classic pop constructions or if they actually had been on movie soundtracks. But I do agree they would have fit on a movie like that. That part makes sense to me. I think the reason I don't want to call it 90s is because I think of the 90s as Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
And it's clearly not that, but they're not trying to be that.
Yeah.
Right.
I did find it a little odd the way that they mixed the vocals, because he's not giving a very projective type of performance, and they mixed the vocals really low compared to what I'm used to. So there were lots of times where the drums and the guitar were both louder than the vocals. And that just seemed like a bizarre choice to me. I didn't hate the way that they produced them. I just kind of wish that they were a little up.
I know that Ian Brown was always known for being kind of lackadaisical, especially like on stage, but
No, you don't say.
lackadaisical in the studio too.
Yeah, yeah.
It's that slacker vocal thing that Tom alluded to. Definitely, that's the style.
Yeah.
I will have to say when I first turned this on, again, I had heard of the Stone Roses, never heard a note. And the opening song has a long intro, and I kept thinking, because you mentioned Robert Christgau mentioned Joy Division. I remember thinking like, oh my God, is this going to be another Joy Division clone? There's this kind of bass line, and then it's totally not, right?
Yeah.
Like nothing about this. So I was pleasantly surprised as well when this didn't turn out to be Joy Division.
No, I was thinking of you this week, Adam, that it was a good fit for you because it has, as Tom mentioned, there's a lot happening in the compositions. Amidst relatively simple songs, you have melodies, you have counter melodies, you have harmonies, you have interesting little rhythmic things. You know, there's a fair amount that went into it that really evoked the best of the 60s, let's say, in a way that it makes sense to me that you can call them a spiritual successor to the Zombies or the other kind of garage pop of that era.
Yeah, totally.
Now, one thing I have to compliment them on, and Rob, I can't believe you haven't brought this up, the amount of times that they use the word stone in a song title or talk about stones in their song. I love it. It's pure genius marketing. Absolutely. You cannot forget who you're listening to.
Yep.
It's one of these things where my comments are ultimately, I wrote some comments right away, as I always do when I first listen to the record, and I got the 60s thing, I got the Birds thing. But then diving into their story, now my comments are colored by that. And they weren't exactly savvy as a set of businessmen, which we're going to get into. So I think it's about time to get into the backstory of the Stone Roses. But before we do, we're just going to take a short break. And we are back. So let's talk about the backstory here. The story of the Stone Roses is about a few different things. It's about an arrogant group of rambunctious scrapper guys attempting to DIY their way to international fame. And it's about Manchester, the second city in the UK for arts and music, and the rise of the pre-Britpop Madchester era and something called the baggy movement. I don't pretend to understand all these movements. But it combined psychedelia from the 60s with dance culture from the 80s. That was the idea there, and they kind of represented or were somewhat flag bearers of that baggy movement. And lastly, and perhaps most poignantly, This is a story about a band that signed not one, but two absolutely horrendous contracts, which killed their momentum and ultimately broke up the group.
Oh, no.
So the Stone Roses, they took a long and winding road to releasing their debut album through style changes, management changes, record label changes, lineup changes. And then they have this brief moment in the sun, but they blew it through infighting, through terrible management, and of course by taking way too long to release a follow-up album.
But not by
Ooh.
drugs.
Doesn't seem like drugs were a big factor here, honestly.
They're missing out. If the band's already going to fall apart, you might as well have some fun, you know?
The story starts off in Manchester in the late 70s. Ian Brown and John Squire meet at school. They are the singer and the guitar player on today's album, respectively. And together they form a band called The Patrol. Very much inspired by groups like the Sex Pistols and The Clash. Squire is playing guitar. Ian's on bass at this point. And another member of that early band, Peter Garner, who later played in the first incarnation of the Stone Roses as well, he said of meeting Ian Brown back in those school days, he said, when we first met, Ian told me that he'd seen the Sex Pistols live. And then he kind of looks wistfully at the camera and he goes, it was an obvious lie, but an impressive one.
Again, we talked about how many people claim to have been at that one Sex Pistols show, right? The room held 30 people, but there are 4,000 musicians who claim to have been there.
And I like how even in 1979 in high school, no one's buying it, but you're just like, hey man, that was an ambitious thing to even say.
I think Peter Hook attended that gig twice.
Exactly. So like a lot of kids who heard the Sex Pistols debut album that we covered earlier this year, they were inspired to think that anyone could be in a band. So they picked up their guitars, they started thrashing away, and then came The Clash. And they really fell in love, especially after this story they tell about camping outside a recording studio as high school kids to try to catch a glimpse of The Clash going in or out. And they end up getting invited into the studio to sit on the floor during a recording session.
What? That is insane.
Which is really cool and speaks very highly of the band. The idea that The Clash would treat fans this way obviously went a long way towards endearing them towards The Clash. Now, I assume the Sex Pistols would have just spit in their face, injected them with black tar heroin while screaming at them that their taste in music sucked.
Or asked advice on how to play their instruments.
As these guys are rounding out their teenage years, they're part of an artsy punk rocker type scene around Manchester. There was some mod scooter culture coming off of the Quadrophenia movie from 1979. And of course, there's this strain of punk do-it-yourself, or what we commonly call DIY culture. Now, part of their circle, I've just found this interesting, was a group of dudes who ran an animation studio that was in the process of creating the Danger Mouse cartoon, which ended up being an international hit. I watched this as a kid. I don't know if you guys did.
Danger Mouse. I know the name. I don't think I watched that as a kid.
Also had a great theme song, Danger Mouse, da-da-da-da-da-da, Danger Mouse. Anyway, it was terrific. Later, a DJ took his name, Danger Mouse, from that cartoon, but it was a fun spy send-up cartoon. Anyway, The Patrol also includes a guitar player called Andy Cousins, and they play around Manchester for a while as The Patrol. They even record a single, but it goes nowhere. And so, as bands do, they start to drift apart. They get jobs as school is now over with. And then, a chance occurrence. A guy called Geno Washington meets Ian Brown at a house party. Now, stay with me here. Geno Washington was a soul singer who was a hit in the late 60s London scene. A minor hit. But this is the late 70s now.
Right.
He's had his 15 minutes of fame. He played with a band called the Ram Jam Soul Band, and he had gone...
That's pretty good, all right.
Yeah, and he had gone back to the States in the 70s.
The Ram Jam Soul Band?
That's correct.
There's another band called Ram Jam. And they're like...
That was later, yes. And actually, you remember, because sometimes I'm driving around town and I think of this little factoid and I laugh to myself, but Ram Jam of Black Betty fame, their original name idea was Creekside Kill Shack. That was the band name before someone told him
that is hardcore.
It fits their look. Honestly, they look like some scary rednecks.
So the point is, this guy had been a hit in the swingin' London scene as a soul singer. He goes back to America, because he is American, in the 70s to study hypnotism for like a decade.
What? Okay.
The first two semesters are just rhythmic watch dangling. But now, get this, he's back in the UK. He's trying to rekindle the magic. So he's like a very minor celebrity. And actually, interestingly, the main way kids of the UK are even aware of him by this point, and even now perhaps, is through a Dexy's Midnight Runners song called Gino, which is about his life. Oh. And I found out this week that that is the second most played Dexy's Midnight Runners song at around 26 million plays compared to Come On Eileen's 900 million, but still.
Jeez, that is a far second place there. All right.
So Gino is past his prime, but recall from our soft sell episode that there is this phenomenon in the UK at this moment called Northern Soul, a resurgence of lesser known tracks from the 60s getting played in the clubs. And so he's out gigging, right? Now Gino plays a show one night in Manchester and he asks his entourage, what's happening on the scene this evening? What's good in this town? And being a crack team, they of course direct him to a 21-year-old's birthday party. Now, he's 37.
Oh, God.
So, but this dude likes to party, right?
Sure, yeah. I mean, who's going to party hardier, right? A 37-year-old guy or a bunch of 21-year-olds? Like, all right.
He goes to the party. It turns out it's at Ian Brown's apartment. And when Ian gets his weed dealer to come by and sell Gino some weed, they bond. And Gino tells Ian he's got lead singer face and that he ought to write songs and learn to sing. And he convinces him in the way that only a trained hypnotist can. I'm picturing a drunk and high 37-year-old soul singer just shouting at a 21-year-old in like a tiny kitchen, yelling at him about his destiny.
Yeah. You got a pretty mouth. You want to write some songs?
But listen, it has its intended effect. It sparks Ian thinking, maybe, just maybe, I am too damn good looking to play the bass. So it just so happens that his old bandmates have also been bothering him to start up or to restart the band and to be the singer. So this tips him over the edge and he agrees, right? And this effectively reunites their high school band, The Patrol, including a drummer called Simon, who has just moved on from playing with a couple other guys around town in a group called Freak Party. Now, these two blokes are Andy Rourke and Johnny Marr, and the reason Simon quits the project to join up with Ian and John is because they've just brought in a singer that he does not like at all.
I wonder who that could be.
And that man's name is Morrissey. The band changed their name to the Smiths shortly after. But okay, back to the Patrol. They record a new demo. They practice a lot. They're a 5-piece with a rhythm guitar player at this point. This is now 1983. Manchester scene is starting to pop off and big time. Joy Division had created this huge wave on the scene a few years before, and this was helped along immensely by local label Factory Records, run by a local celebrity called Tony Wilson, who also owned a music venue called the Hacienda. And so it's all fairly recent that this whole group are local legends. But if you've ever seen the film 24-Hour Party People, it's more or less a biopic of Tony Wilson and the Factory Records at that time. So Manchester was really considered a happening place right around this time. But he kind of runs the town at this time, right? And it was an exciting place for bands. And I think this is part of why young people are always starting bands in every town around the world, of course. But I think that this is part of the ethos they wanted to, and not just the Factory Records piece, but the fact that the Smiths quickly went from local band that they were kind of friends with right on to Top of the Pops in 1983. It kind of instant success. It quickly makes them want to double down for being in a band, right?
Like, I can actually sing. We can make this happen.
So they, speaking of which, they insist on Ian taking singing lessons before they continue in earnest, and he does. And again, nothing is happening right away, right? This is a long process for this band. And a few months go by, they're playing around, whatever. When the drummer gets a chance to join a real band in a few months, he leaves. He leaves the band. They hold auditions, and they find their one true drummer, this guy called Rennie. He's the guy that plays on our album today. And right away, they sound better. They sound tighter. It's obvious he's the most gifted musician in the band. He sings all the harmonies on the record, by the way.
Damn. Okay.
So he was really the glue. It was one of those moments they talk about where as soon as they got him in practice, it was just like, oh, we sound better instantaneously. So now we have 3 of the 4 players who end up on this debut that we listened to this week. Now, I did mention these guys were into punk music, but they were also listening to 60s pop music. The Beatles, the Zombies, Love, plus some of the girl group stuff like the Ronettes. And in comparison, I should point out that they had a reasonably friendly rivalry with the Smiths, and they were purposely aiming to make happy, upbeat music, and they would goof on the Smiths guys all the time for being sad bastards. Like, we're young, we're in a band, what's the problem?
Why are you so sad and angry, Morrissey?
Pretty quickly at this point, they decide they have to have a new name, and they land on the Stone Roses. The explanation they gave was because it was hard and soft at the same time, and they thought it harkened back to the 60s as well with the flower imagery.
Okay.
Dig it.
So their first gig ever as the Stone Roses is in London in 1984. So not their hometown, not really that close to their hometown. They got it by claiming they were already a big draw in Manchester, which was patently false. And get this, it's a benefit concert, and they're opening for Pete Townsend of The Who.
Jeez. Man.
And Pete Townsend loves it. He gets up, he jams with the band. He even asks the drummer, Rennie, to be a part of his solo band that he's recording with. But Rennie's like, nah, I'm cool.
Oh, wow.
Gangster. Yo, lying gets you everywhere, kids. Just remember that, okay? You want to be somebody? Lie. No, but that's the classic fake it before you make it thing, right?
Absolutely.
Like, of course you're going to prop yourself up and say you're a badass, and that's a wild first gig, man. Good for them.
Good for them. So at this point, the local Manchester community, the music community, starts to take a little bit of notice. They get a manager called Howard Jones. He had previously been managing that big club I mentioned in Manchester called the Hacienda. He lines them up to do the recording with Martin Hannett, the same guy who had produced the Joy Division albums. And he gives them a record contract with his own label called Thin Line. And I get the sense that, again, because Manchester as a city, a musical city, it was popping off. There were a lot of people trying to make indie labels and do their own imprints, and a lot of dealsmanship going on here. So they're starting to build up a little buzz, and they get booked through this new manager on a tour of Sweden. And this becomes their big inflection point. They play internationally. They play multiple nights in a row. It tightens up the band quite a lot, and it actually starts to soften up their sound a little bit. They were much more punked up and fast, and they've been slowly integrating those 60s and softer influences. Now they have this drummer who can sing harmonies. You know, they're making use of these things, and they're changing, right? And ultimately, the experience in Sweden is a great one. They bond as a band, and they decide, we're going all in. We're quitting our day jobs. Go all in on the band.
Nice.
Yeah, so they get back home, and they go into the studio with this guy, Martin Hannett, to make a record. And he sounds like a drugged out madman.
He was a space cadet. Yeah, man.
Apparently just falls asleep randomly at the mixing board, like during the take. And there was one anecdote about how Ian was working on a vocal take and finished a run through. And when no one's answering in the talkback mic, he just goes out to the control room and it's just empty because the guy's gone to the pub, like during the take.
Nice.
So this is 1985 now. They end up finishing those recording sessions, but the band hates it, in large part because they're older songs. The band has already shifted style away. They don't feel like that represents them anymore. Now they want to be 60s pop, jangly, reverby harmonies. And I do think this is something they deserve some credit for. At a time when Joy Division, New Order, and even the Smiths were the prevailing sound of Manchester, they're definitely pushing things in a different direction, right?
Yeah. I get some Johnny Marr from John Squire's bass guitar style. Definitely. But I think that, yeah, in terms of the contents of the songs, definitely very, very anti-Smiths or Joy Division, certainly.
And just in general, kind of anti what was popular in the 80s, very broadly speaking, which tended to be darker, synthier. You know what the 80s sound like, right? So
Right.
A little bit against the curve, right? And as we alluded to in our general impressions, they did bring about this wave of Britpop that made this kind of music much more popular and a big part of the 90s, right? So they decide to shelve the project, the Martin Hannett project. I also think I get the impression that no one wanted it. They did kind of shop it around. People didn't like the sound of it. Yeah, so for various reasons, it just wasn't selling. It wasn't working. The band didn't like it.
Is it just me, or do no bands like working with Martin Hannett?
Yeah.
Yeah, he seems like a nutter, dude.
Serious.
But I got to tell you, the roll into the pub in the middle of a take, it's kind of a baller move. It's kind of like a baller power move. I mean, you clearly don't give a shit and your life is a travesty, but yeah.
So they're like, we got to dig in. We got to write new songs in this new style, and then we'll get them on the tape here. And they're moving towards the direction of the record that we listened to this week. But they are impatient and slightly anarchist. Despite now being a draw on the Manchester scene, they have like $0. They have no rehearsal space. They aren't getting the attention they want. So they stage a publicity stunt where one night they go all over town and spray paint Stone Roses everywhere.
God,
It did get them on the news, but it also sort of got them blacklisted from the Manchester scene.
Rob, remember we had that stencil of the Chop logo back in the day, and they used to spray paint that all over the town too.
Of course. Yeah. But that was cool.
I didn't do it on people's houses. It was mostly like sidewalks and stuff.
I get the impression they were like going to buildings and spray painting on windows and garages and sort of more proper graffiti. I don't consider the sidewalk. Sidewalk is fair game, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally.
Tony Wilson, wasn't he pissed at him because they spray painted their logo on government buildings? That's the part that he was like, oh, it's a government building.
Because he had so much respect for the crown at the time?
Right.
So basically, things are not going amazing for them. They're trying to find their lane, and they chalk some of this lack of success up to their management. So they start looking for someone else who can direct them in business, but also sell their new, softer sound. And they land on a guy called Gareth Evans. Now, there is some evidence right away that this dude is a grifter to end all grifters, but it seems like they almost invited that purposely. The contract he gets them to sign gave him 33% of gross profit for 10 years. And the band seemed like they knew that was a terrible deal, but they felt like it was their last chance or their last dollar, or they were trying to be punk about it. I'm not sure, but they signed.
Desperation.
So this is foreshadowing, because this is really going to haunt them for a while. This is the first of the terrible contracts they sign. Listen, seriously, this guy Gareth Evans is such a slimeball. In the documentary I watched, he's so insanely unrepentant about being a slimeball and a shyster, and he denies any wrongdoing consistently. Plus, he claims all credit for the band's success.
Wow.
Oh my God. What an ass.
That's kind of amazing.
He claimed he wrote some of the songs too, I believe.
He's wild. It's like almost worth watching the documentary just to see this guy be an asshole. So his history, let's talk about him for a second. Gareth Evans, his history is sketchy at best. And also I get the feeling that he lies constantly about everything. I'm kind of guessing, but that's just how he seems, including the facts of his own life. So take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. But he trained as a hairdresser under the Vidal Sassoon and then opened a string of hair salons in the 70s.
Vidal Sassoon's a guy?
It is.
Wow.
No idea. All right. Learning things left and right.
I figured that was like the name of an institute or something.
Right.
And eventually he buys an older venue in Manchester and renovated it to compete with Manchester's factory. It's called the International. He doesn't even have a wiki page, which is kind of striking. And I'm guessing it's because he pays someone to scrub the internet periodically.
Right. Yeah.
So the band said that they liked that he was half gangster, half used car salesman. Like they claim they were attracted by that. They wanted to have a gangster type manager like Led Zeppelin had Peter Grant, someone who was really going to be a little shady in getting things done. They even mentioned that Gareth Evans had this very cheesy trick where every time he'd stand up, a roll of cash would drop out of his pocket accidentally.
What an ass. Oh my God.
That is kind of amazing though. But I want like a hard-nosed, take no shit kind of guy managing me who's not going to let any of these promoters screw me over. But you don't want that guy to be a half-used car salesman who's going to screw you over, right? Like seems like the worst of both worlds.
Delicate balance. It's a delicate balance.
It's 33% off the top. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So all that, plus the dude seems to start right in on creating divisions within the band. As soon as they sign with him, the decision gets made somehow, some way, that songwriting credit will be given solely to John and Ian. And admittedly, they are working together as songwriters, and it sounds like Gareth Evans just saw them as his Lennon and McCartney. But the band feels very betrayed by that. They were under the impression that they were misled and, that they had all been working on the songs together, and that's sort of the way it was going. They briefly quit and then are coaxed back. Some of them are coaxed back for a short amount of time.
I got to tell you, I noted that in the liner notes. And I was like, they are really doing a lot of erasure of that rhythm section by saying that these songs were all written by Ian and John. That seems pretty unfair. So I'm
Yeah.
glad to know that it wasn't Ian and John being dicks about it. Maybe they just agreed with Gareth being a dick about it. I don't
A
know.
lot of this stuff is like unconfirmed hearsay about where Gareth Evans had his say, but it seems like as soon as he got in the mix, things started getting weird between the band members. So the band continues on. They're playing gigs. They're working on new material. We're now in 1986, and the rhythm guitar player Andy Cousins quits. And there are competing stories, but it sounds like he was pushed out by Gareth Evans. The songwriting thing must have been a factor as well. That hadn't happened too far in the past. But ultimately, the band decides that they work better as a four-piece without a rhythm guitar player. So they continue on. Now, they sign to a heavy metal label. For some reason, Gareth Evans gets him a contract with a heavy metal label called FM Revolver that I guess is just trying to get into rock.
Okay.
But it was a bizarre move at the time. And they release a single called Sally Cinnamon, which to me just sounds like what Fred Armisen would name a 60s psych pop song in a parody of this story.
You're right.
In 1987, the bass player quits, and they hire a guy called Manny to replace him. That's Mani. And finally, now we have the lineup for this release, the debut album. And by the way, the band has two guys with very similar nicknames. There's the drummer, Rennie, real name Alan, and there's the bass player, Manny, real name Gary.
They could have gone with the drummer's nickname being Petty, and then he could have had Manny Petty, and it would have been great. It would have been perfect. They're missing out.
Missed opportunity, bro. So I guess the manager and the band at this point, they feel like they've locked all the pieces into place, and they go in and record Elephant Stone as a single with Peter Hook, the lead bass for Joy Division and New Order, as producer.
Lead bass, yes.
I know. What's the Spinal Tap song where it's like three bass players?
Big Bottoms.
Yes. That's what that always makes me think of. Classic.
Beautiful.
And so at this point, that song goes well enough. There's a light bidding war between labels at this time. The big indie on the block is called Rough Trade, and they actually think they're going to get the band to sign with them because they pay for the session with Peter Hook.
Rough Trade just always sounds so dirty to me. Every time I hear that, it sounds like a dirty sex thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, you're into the Rough Trade. Oh, okay.
And, that was like the player on the block that would have been, well, one, they were bigger. Even though they were an indie, they were bigger, they were more established. But that was like the cool label to have signed with. But they don't sign with them. So instead, Gareth Evans, their manager, pushes them to sign a deal with Jive Records, buying them away from that heavy metal label. Now, Jive is a dance label that had released Billy Ocean most recently, which is kind of weird.
Get out of my dreams, guy.
That's correct. Yes.
Yes. Get out of my dreams. Get into my car. The song about abducting a woman.
What song in the 80s wasn't about that?
Right.
I don't know how this record deal is a result of Gareth Evans, the manager's shiesty dealings, but I feel it must be because this is also a terrible deal. And so it's Jive's imprint, Silvertone, that actually releases the record. The contract with this label was for 10 years, effectively forever. So again, terrible idea for the band, but they signed it.
What's this say? You get 50% of everything we sell for the next 14 bajillion years? Yeah, that sounds great, guys. It's kind of punk,
Now, sadly, Peter Hooky, isn't available to finish the record. So instead, they head into the studio with a guy called John Leckie at a place called Battery Studios. And it sounds like they also did some recording. I just thought this was funny at a place called Conch Studios, which is the cheeky name for the studio founded by the Kinks.
That's good. I like that.
They end up buying back the rights to Elephant Stone from Rough Trade, who had paid for the session, to release it through Silvertone. But it doesn't do much as a single, sadly. Now, some stories from the studio are that the producer found them not ready at all to record. That they spent, which is ironic because they've been playing for so long at this point.
Years, like almost 5 years, right?
They've been in a band for 6 years.
6 years, exactly.
Jeez.
But the producer says, they spent the first couple days drilling on things like timing and helping them write intros and outros.
Oh, God.
And, quick side note, I didn't put this on the focus list, but I do think it's worth a mention. There is a cool backwards track on the record called Don't Stop.
Yes. Yeah, that was cool.
Which probably should have stopped sooner, but
There's another backwards track that's on the expanded version called Guernica. It's Made of Stone backwards is the bass for that one.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, so I thought it was worth mentioning because it is kind of a cool experimental track. The tape is being played backwards, but they also recorded everything backwards, including, apparently, putting mics under cymbals instead of over them and behind guitar amps instead of in front.
I get the under the cymbals, the behind the guitar amp doesn't make any sense to me. That's not where the sound comes out.
It's backwards,
I think
baby.
they eventually learned how to play it backwards live, too.
Oh, wow.
Damn.
That's impressive.
That's kind of cool. That's cool.
It took them 55 days to make this record, and they were significantly over budget.
One would imagine.
Quick note here. This is one of those examples of a record where the original UK release and the original US release are a little different. So we're generally sticking to the UK original release here, but at our guest Mike's request, we're going to cover Elephant Stone, which in the UK was just a single and wasn't included on the original release, but it was on that original US copy that Mike would have gotten his hands on.
And no Fool's Gold either, because I believe Fool's Gold was also on the UK release as well.
By the time they got it to America, they bloated it up. They fattened it up for us.
Right, for us.
Yeah, because Fool's Gold is like, what, like 9 minutes long or something like that? Like, it's
It's
insane.
hefty. It's hefty.
So Elephant Stone, it does sell a couple thousand copies, but it's mostly a Manchester thing. It's selling in Manchester. And the thing they're starting to realize about Manchester, we've already touched on it, is that there's an old guard. The guys who run the music scene, that is Factory Records, the Hacienda. And it seems that by dropping that other manager and maybe some other things, they've angered the power players in the scene.
Ruh-roh.
Ian called them the Manchester Mafia. And the Stone Roses foolishly thought they could do it without their help, maybe even taunting them directly, since apparently Tony Wilson did hate the group for a while. He said it was because of the sound, but maybe it was some of those other reasons, the graffitiing, and the lack of deference to their forefathers, if you will,
Yeah.
in Factory
I'm
Records.
pretty sure Ian Brown is not exactly the nicest guy to get along with either.
They seem adversarial. That would be a
Yeah.
charitable way to put how this band acts.
Also, I got to say, I'm a little disappointed that all they came up with was the Manchester Mafia. I feel like all the British gangs have names like the 15th Street Macaulay Boys or something like that. You know, like give me something that's got a little more pop to it, a little more flavor. Manchester Mafia, it's just, it's not thought through.
Well, that's kind of reflected in some of the lyrics on this album, too. It's like, well,
first draft lyrics.
yes, exactly, right.
So the album drops. It's not doing amazing. The single that predated it didn't do amazing. They're trying to figure it out, and they get this opportunity to play on another band drops out, and at the last second they get invited to play on this Tony Wilson hosted local but very influential TV show called The Other Side of Midnight. And that's when things start to happen for them. The album starts to take off. The next single that they put out, called Made of Stone, which is on our focus list, charts higher, and they are on their way up. Which brings us to our favorite segment, Stone Roses by the Numbers.
I was waiting for this one.
Woo! Let's do it. They're all negative numbers, by the way, I assume, right? Net worth, revenue.
First number I want to throw out to you is number 1, as in the greatest British album ever, as written by NME in 2006.
What?
It also appeared as number 11 on Colin Larkin's Top 1,000 Albums of All Time, number 7 on NME's 500 Greatest Albums, period, of all time, and it was voted to be the 3rd best album of the 80s by BBC listeners in 2020, beating both Thriller and Appetite for Destruction and Graceland.
This album is British royalty.
Wow. That's wild.
Yeah, this album has some fans.
I'm glad I did not read that stuff before I listened to the album, because then I would have been disappointed. I would have been super disappointed. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, you've heard Graceland, right?
I think we have to acknowledge that there is a hype machine going on here. They were a band of the moment. I think even its fans, Mike, would have to acknowledge some of that. And while what is on the tape is a lot of fun, and we're going to talk about the songs soon, it does feel a little bit, those accolades don't quite resonate with what I'm hearing as a first-time listener in 2025. But that's okay. I do like it. And for the record, I do think it's better than the Oasis debut.
Agreed, yes.
Next number I want to throw out to you is number 6. That is the number of times their second single, Made of Stone has charted separately in the UK singles charts in 1989, in 1990, in 2009, in 2017, and most recently in 2022.
And that slimy guy was still getting money from every one of those plays, right?
I couldn't figure out exactly why. Some of it must have been around some of their reunions, because they did end up having some reunions in the mid 2000s, but they don't seem tied specifically to these dates. I don't know. I honestly don't know.
They get used on a show or something like that.
No, it was like 11 to 17, something like that. It was only like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. The next generation of painfully annoying hipsters are finding out about the band that, you wouldn't know about them. They're kind of a little obscure.
But weirdly, the song never reached higher than 20 on that singles chart, all 6 of those times. And Elephant Stone peaked out at number 8, so that was their best charting single. But the next number I want to throw out to you is 86. That is the highest this album ever charted in the US. So there is a big disparity here, and I know our listeners in the UK are groaning, but yes, that's why we've never heard this before.
We've at least got an excuse.
Now, the next number I want to throw out to you is 4 million. That is the number of copies supposedly sold of this album all time. In the UK in particular, it is certified 6 times platinum, which is 1.5 million sold. So it's ultimately a big success that only seems to grow in people's estimation, especially UK listeners, as time goes on. I thought I would read a little bit from Pitchfork's 20-year anniversary review, where they directly respond to Robert Christkow's earlier review, his scathing review.
Ooh.
Yeah, let's hear the glazing that Pitchfork gives this.
They call Christkow's opinion classic boomer, and they attempt to answer his question about what the Roses were doing that a million other American indie bands weren't. Pitchfork writes, to answer Christkow's question, what the Stone Roses did better was to marry smart psychedelic pop to dance grooves in an incredibly accessible and powerful way that appealed both to rock and rave fans, lovers of hooks and beats, punks, and people who actually welcomed 10-minute guitar solos.
All right.
And to be honest, I do think that was well written, and that helped me understand a little better what's going on here. They make some good points. To be fair, I don't really hear as much of the dance culture in this music as being implied there.
That's where Fool's Gold comes in.
Yeah, I get that part. But certainly long guitar solos, these things weren't in fashion at the time. I think they were a little against the grain, and I can respect that.
I also feel that 1989 is when you've already had the high watermark of like the synth and the hair metal and shit like that. And I think people were casting about for something new. Like everything was kind of feeling a little stale. And there needed to be some new revolution that came through, which ended up being grunge and hip hop, basically, and Britpop.
Last number I want to throw out to you is countless, as in the hours of bonus entertainment you can reap from our Patreon page. Whether you sign up for free and vote in one of our polls and join the conversation after the show, or kick in a scant £5 a month to access all our bonus shows ever, from our Guilty Pleasure series to the latest song battle on 90s one-hit wonders to our latest foray into comedy, Vanity Project, where we tell the story behind celebrity albums and then mock them mercilessly for your pleasure.
Definitely not our pleasure.
If you go check out the Patreon, you might end up winning a raffle.
There we go. Yeah.
That too. We do all kinds of fun stuff over there. Mike is a testament to that. He's on the show now. You want to come on the show? Well, the way you're going to find out about those fun contests is to be over there, even on our free Patreon. But truly, regardless of how you choose to support the show, even if it's just by listening every week, we appreciate you and we do thank you. Okay, back to the story. The record starts to get traction and make sales, but now the heavy metal label realizes that they blew it, so they re-release Sally Cinnamon, the only thing they have from this band. And they try to capitalize on this new success, and they ask the lads in the band to help make a music video to promote it, and the band outright refuses. And the video that gets produced, because this is the MTV era, right? They need a video. The video that gets produced is so cheap. I watched it. It looks like a karaoke video at a KTV lounge in Korea or something. It's so terrible. The band is super pissed about this. They go over to the offices of this label and they trash the place. They throw paint everywhere, including on the label head himself and on several expensive cars. Did I mention that they are a little bit adversarial when you anger them? Now, this lands them in jail briefly and then in court. And they pay a large fine to pay off the damages. And of course, they are banned from the premises. And all the while, they're talking to the manager, Gareth. And it sounds like he may have egged them towards this stunt as well. It's hard to say. But the guy was quoted as saying jail time would have been very good for the band. And that they'd have worked out, gotten fit, and written some good songs about the experience.
Good Lord. Meanwhile, he's like pawning their shit while they're in jail on the side.
Rob, I just watched that video. It's awful. It's just stock footage. I don't even know if the band members are in it anywhere.
It literally is a karaoke video. I mean, that's what karaoke videos do. They just splice B-roll together that makes no sense and occasionally use the slow motion effect.
Right.
So look, maybe the extra publicity does work because they continue to be a buzzy band and sell records, and they end up, through their rise, they go on top of the pops in November 1989, and they land finally some nationwide attention. So now, man, they are on a roll. They are so confident, in fact, that they hire a new band member named Cressa, who's just credited with dancing.
Is he the one in the background of the waterfall video that you see?
That's right. Yep. So in the Gantt chart of this band, he has a line. He's in the band for 1 year, and he's credited with dancing. And I think he specifically stands behind the guitar player. So maybe they are innovators.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Right behind the stack of guitar amps. Yeah, that's right where he is.
They must hate money, right? That seems to be their thing. They hate money. Like, I just want to make sure I can give away as much as possible.
I don't think they were making any money. Yeah, I really don't think they were making any money. We're going to get to some of the financial shadiness, but they clearly weren't thinking about business. So they're feeling their oats, and they decide, let's hold our own festival. And it's at a place called Spike Island, which is an artificially created island near Manchester that was the center of the local chemical manufacturing industry for many decades, and basically abandoned and a chemical dump by the time they decided to bring 35,000 fans there for a show.
35,000 fans?
Yeah, they just released a movie about, I think, just last year about Spike Island, about 5 kids going to see their favorite band.
Now they all have lymphoma.
So the organization of the event, this is like Fire Festival before Fire Festival. The organization of the event was amateurish, which I think is a nice way of putting it, but it was kind of like their Woodstock. And I also read that as the Stone Roses took the stage, there were multiple bands that day, right? Outdoor thing. Just as the Stone Roses took the stage, a big cloud of red dust got kicked up, and a bunch of people in the audience had asthma attacks right away.
Oh my God.
That's good.
So it just sounds like that was one of the last straws. That was a huge prominent gig they played, and they did not play again for a long time. But also happening at around this time, there were some very prominent lawsuits with bands successfully getting out of predatory record contracts in the UK. So they decide to fight their record contract, the 10-year one with Silvertone, and get it torn up. But Silvertone fights back much stronger than they expected, and it basically stops any momentum the band has, locks them into a prolonged legal battle. Jeez. While that plays out, there's a legal injunction in place, so they can't record any more material. I believe they can't play shows either. Now, so this is part of what stumbles them up. Confident, however, that they will win the court case, manager Gareth Evans heads to America to court a new label. He meets with David Geffen. He accepts a $300,000 check from him to help with the legal battle, premise being that they're going to sign with Geffen. Now, the band never sees that check or knows anything about it.
Oh, my God.
That's fantastic. God.
Couple years go by here. It's the end of 1991. The case finally reaches court. The band starts realizing in court how much money Gareth, the manager, has been sucking out of the band. There were record company bonuses and other royalties that he just never told them about. He's covering like 100% of the business as per his insane management contract. They just never asked questions. He'd print t-shirts from band royalties and then sell them and then keep 100% of the profit. Stuff like that.
Dude, what an ass. That is wild.
So as the court case winds down, which they do eventually win, they decide to fire him. And he sues the shit out of them. And literally a quote from this guy around this time is, "I am the Stone Roses." Just completely unrepentant asshole. He sounds unhinged in in the documentary footage that I watched of him. I can't believe he must not have had edit rights, but like everyone else in the thing is just like, this guy's completely shady. And then I don't even feel like you need the testimony of others. He just reads as a liar.
He tells you how shady he is.
What a fucked up move is it? I'm going to take the money that I stole from you to hire a lawyer to sue you.
Jesus,
so
you're
galling.
That's
Like, why
pretty-
can you afford such a better lawyer than we? Oh, you've been stealing all of our money. That's why.
Now, finally, a little ray of sunshine. In late 91, as the court case comes to a close, close to 3 years after the debut album was actually released, they officially end their legal troubles, at least with Silvertone, and they sign to Geffen Records, home of Guns N' Roses. However, it would still be 2 years before they would release a follow-up. They're now living apart. They have growing families. They have other concerns. They end up spending, get this, 347 10-hour studio days on the next album.
Jesus Christ.
That's almost a year of every single day in the studio, although it plays out over 3 years.
Wow.
But that's also like 800 to $1,000 a day, right?
Yeah, I think what happened was Geffen was willing to spend anything. They really believed in them because this first record had done so well. They were an it band. Geffen had all this money from their recent Guns N' Roses success. Remember that Appetite for Destruction is one of the best-selling records of all time. And the album comes out. It's called Second Coming. It finally gets released in 1995, but generally disappointing reviews. They're now just another band. They had missed their moment, and as you might remember, the world, and in particularly Manchester, had moved on. Oasis's debut definitely maybe dropped the year before in 1994, and the next generation of Britpop had taken over.
And you got your Bittersweet Symphony and all those guys coming along.
Indeed. Now, to be fair, they had a number 2 hit off the record. It's okay. I listened to the record once. It's a lot bluesier, and I do agree that it blends in more with everything else from the 90s. They don't feel like innovators anymore. It's also, in classic 90s fashion, excessively long, 72 plus minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, all this stuff combined just kills the band. In 1996, they officially split. And as Mike mentioned at the top, in 2012, they reunited for a few gigs. And over the next couple of years, they played a few big shows. But they are now disbanded once again.
You know, usually you get the one big album that sells a lot. You know, we talked about this before. I always hold up Candlebox as like a shit 90s band. They had one hit. They all are millionaires to this day. Still doing great because they sold a bunch of CDs, right? The Stone Roses didn't even get that because they had all their money stolen from them and they signed terrible contracts. I could at least accept it if they're like, well, we're just all comfortable now and we live great lives. But it doesn't sound like that's the case, you know? I'm sure they're doing fine, but...
Yeah, they've had reasonably successful solo projects, I think, over the years. And yeah, I'm sure it seems like they're continuing to make a living. But you're right, they didn't get rich off this. It's partly because of the terrible management deal they signed. You know, I have to say, some of this rests with them. It doesn't seem like, even leading up to their first album, they were not able to just buckle down and write with any kind of speed. That was a challenge for them. It took them 6 years to get to that first album, and then it took another 6 years almost to get to the second album.
And no serious drug problems?
I didn't hear about any drug problems.
You hear about bands that have that drive, you know, the drive to like make an album, they get it, and they just keep going. They didn't have it. They didn't have it.
Well, who joins a rock band to do work, I think is the prevailing thought.
That is often the case.
Right? But the reality is, like anything, it's work.
Yeah.
It is work.
Yeah.
That is the end of our story. Do you guys want to talk some songs now?
Do it.
First, we're going to revisit the opening track that we played a little bit of at the top. It is called I Want to...
Adored. That's all I kept thinking about.
Which is what I thought it was for the first 3 times listening to it. I was like, wow, this guy really wants to be... Let me go look at this. Oh, adored.
Maybe he had an Iggy Pop fetish or something.
Certainly not in his vocal delivery.
Yeah, right.
No, this song is driving. I actually really dig songs like this that kind of come in and really establish like a nice driving rhythm like that. They do it a bunch on the album where they kind of wait a long time for the lyrics to come in. Mm-hmm. It works really well at the beginning of an album.
I agree. I think the build at the top is good. It's worth it. It pays off. I like the song a lot. I think it's very successful. It's a great introduction to the album. You know, there's a lot of vibe going on with this band. And this does establish that vibe. For me, the vibe sounds more 80s than 90s. Again, harkening back to our earlier comments, like I don't see that much connection between the vibe of what I'm hearing musically with something like Oasis. Maybe I'm missing it. I think the vocal delivery and things like that are connected to the 90s and the Oasis Britpop phenomenon. But I also want to say that I think lyrically, this is a fun, cheeky lyric about what rock stars really want, which is attention.
He says he wants to be adored, but I'm pretty sure Ian Brown is demanding to be adored.
Yeah, he's got a real look about him. I guess he's a handsome guy, but he's very skeletal looking, right?
That was we're in the heroin chic era, right? You know, he seems like one of those guys that I hate to say because I don't know him, but he seemed like maybe one of those guys that everything in life just kind of came easily for him, so he didn't feel like he had to try all that much. He's a good-looking dude. I assume he's tall based upon his attitude. He's a tall, good-looking guy with all the confidence in the world for no apparent reason.
The thing about this song the most is I just remember as a DJ, it was like your favorite song ever. Because you could get a bunch of reads off. All the stuff that you had to get done in the hour, you could do it for this one song.
Oh, you could read the traffic, the weather, the pizza shop commercial all before the lyrics start.
Well, so that would be a complaint is they go back to that well so many times. That's a really common trope for them. And I understand they're trying to build suspense and give you a payoff. I think it works well in this song. It works not as well in some of the other tracks. But they are a little samey.
Yeah, that's kind of a hallmark of bands that are trying to build a soundscape. And I do think of them as very soundscapey. There's a lot going on. It does seem very lush. I feel like the guitar work is particularly good. And I will give John Squire a lot of credit. He does a lot of cool, not strummy strum, a lot of cool like lines that he's playing over top of it that are just complementary to the memories.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the tone too, I think really complements what he's playing.
We need Phil to break down the diminished eighths or whatever.
I think we've all heard enough of that in our lifetime.
To be clear, a diminished 8 would be a major 7.
Boom.
Oh, sorry. What happened? I just blacked out for a second.
Yeah, I thought this was a cool lead off as well. The turns that this album kind of took. So this opening track, I actually don't feel is super representative of the rest of the album. I feel the rest of the album is pretty upbeat, and this is very, like you said, very driving. And this was the song where I got the Joy Division vibes, right? Which is that driving bass line. And I was quite happy to see where it went for the rest of the album. I would have been a little depressed if this was like their go-to sound of this kind of down minor kind of swirly thing. So yeah, this was a cool intro, a cool opening. Like you said, Rob built some drama in there. What's going to happen? When are the drums going to come in? What are the lyrics going to be like first time through? And yeah, I thought this was a great kickoff.
I like the way that, a lot of bands want to hit you in the face with their very first song. But it's like these guys, they walked into the room, and they sat down, they looked around, tried to figure out who the coolest people in the room were, and just got to eyeball them until they came over to talk to them. Next thing you know, everybody at the party is hanging out with the Stone Roses. That's what this song reminds me of.
Yeah, right.
No, it's a good point because they did mention in this book I read about the Stone Roses, War and Peace, that they were very confident. I've been saying it as arrogance this whole time, and they were arrogant at times. But when it came to the studio, they felt confident that they had something good. They knew what they were. They knew what they wanted to do. And they knew the record was going to be great. And they were focused. The producer, even though he said that there were some places where they needed a little coaching, he also noted that they just knew they had something good and they were focused on trying to execute it.
I got a bit of a 17 Seconds, the album by The Cure vibe from this.
Yeah, I could hear that. I could definitely hear that.
Yeah, I can see that being a little backward, what you're talking about, the backwards looking, but I don't think that is a bad thing.
That's a good, man. I would never, I'd put that together. Nice, Tom.
Well, I mean, I did have to host that episode, so I did a lot of research on The Cure for that.
There you go.
So it's
Yeah,
stuck in
yeah.
there.
I wrote down The Cure a couple times. That is the kind of 80s that I was thinking of. And I do also hear the Johnny Marr guitar comparison, maybe on a few of the other tunes. All right, let's move it right along. I'm going to put Elephant Stone.
Right from the beginning, I was like, I have no idea where this is going. I liked the beat, and then when the song came in, I was like, that was not the song I was expecting to come in with that beat.
Totally, yeah. Pulled the carpet out, but in a good way.
This actually isn't the version that was on the original album. The original album is the Peter Hook version. This is the demo one that's put on the playlist. The original version, I think like the only place you can even find it anymore is on Spotify and a British compilation called Cigarettes and Alcohol. Very, very British. But it's the only place I found the Peter Hook version. It's really similar, but it starts out instead of the it just goes straight into the song within like 2 seconds.
So I think you're talking about a different mix, not a different recording, though, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the Peter Hook mix is the one that I have on my original CD.
Yeah, fair enough. I think because they only recorded it once. So yeah, as we're talking about it, so this came earlier in the track list. I think number 3 in the track list on the U.S. release. This song did. I do think this is showing off some of their psych roots. You get the weird cymbal effect, slow down, reverby, delay stuff. I kind of felt that the drums at the beginning, which were really cool, didn't pay off for me in the song. Like it sets a false expectation. So to me, this as a single is a little bit boring compared to the other songs. Not a bad song or anything. It's well composed, nicely textured, layered pop music, like everything they do, really. But as a single, I felt like this was lacking something.
I liked the misdirection from the drums, and that I feel like differentiated it enough for me that made it more interesting than some of the other songs. Because they, again, samey band. I'm looking for anything that's going to break me out of that mold. And so I did think that came in pretty well, and it perked my ears up when I heard it. It's interesting that you say that this is a different mix of their demo. And actually, the thing that I'm about to talk about makes a little bit more sense in that light, because there's an issue. It's like right around 2 minutes and 50 seconds or something like that. They're a band that already mixes their vocals pretty low, but they have a harmony come in, and the harmony is just like significantly louder than the main vocal. And it's only in one ear. It's like in the left track. And I don't understand why you did that. That's just a mistake. But then it's like, oh, that probably just was a mistake if it was a very early version and it wasn't something that was, belabored as much.
They would have recorded it with Peter Hook in the production desk, and they would have made a mix of it and released it as a single. But perhaps what we're getting is not that. We're getting a John Leckie, when they're actually cutting the album, remix.
I think it's a demo, actually, is what it is on the version on Spotify. Elephant Stone, the first one you can find on the 20th anniversary, is a demo of Elephant Stone.
So either it's a demo or Mike Leckie is a hack. I'm fine with either one of them.
I like a lot of these old records that have these bonus discs. Spotify has not done a great job of organizing what the heck is going on here, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I'm blaming someone else. Classic Rob.
I had to look and search and find, and I've loved this album for years, and it took me like months to actually find it on Spotify.
Yeah, interesting. I did hear an anecdote about how when they were recording this with Peter Hook, that he really wanted to hear a drum part a certain way, and that Rennie, the drummer, just refused to do it. And so then when he left the studio, Peter Hook just hired another drummer to do the part. And then Rennie came back when the guy was doing the take, and he was like, oh, you can't do that. I guess I'll do it now. And they did. I mean, these guys kind of just seem not that nice to work with sometimes.
Yeah, but that's a dick move on Peter Hook's part, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Apparently, he wouldn't even try the idea out, I think is the point of my story.
Yeah. Fair enough.
You did hire this elder statesman of the Manchester scene to produce your record, so let's keep it rolling along here to the next track on our list. It's called Bye Bye Bad, because I thought the chorus was boring, but I have to admit it's a high bar.
Yeah. I quite like when they go into the chorus and it kind of hits double time. I thought that was a nice touch. And generally speaking, I do think that Rennie puts good beats together, and they don't feel stock.
I love the shuffle in that song. It's one of my favorite parts. It's just his drumming in that song is amazing.
I did list this one as this one gave me the peak 90s guitar tone, and just plucking through the chords and the delay on the guitar and the tone of the guitar, everything to me, again, went right back to that So I Married an Axe Murderer. I felt like this could have been over a montage of them walking through the city.
That's got She's So High, songs like that, right?
Yes, right. Something like that, yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the artwork for the cover is also called Bye Bye Bad Man, and it is a painting by John Squire, the guitar player.
Oh, wow.
Obviously a Jackson Pollock-inspired splatter painting, and the whole thing, including the song, is inspired by the 1968 riots in Paris. He apparently met some French guy who had been there and told him that they used lemons to counteract tear gas, and that's why there's lemons on the painting.
And I believe there's a tricolore flag on one side of the album, too. It's a nod to France on the album cover.
Yeah, interesting. I know that he did like all of their cover artwork, right?
Anything you see painted on is he did. And actually, a lot of their instruments have the same, if you see videos of them, they have the same type of pattern on them as well.
Interesting.
I have perhaps an ignorant question. Is it challenging to do a splatter painting like that?
Someone who was substituted in an art class, it is definitely not hard to splatter paint.
Yeah, it's like the first guy that does it gets credit for being the first guy, and everybody else is just fucking throwing shit
Damn
at
it,
the
why didn't I
canvas.
think of that?
I will give them credit on this song. I always like a song where the subject matter of the lyrics completely clashes with the tone and the vibe of the song. Like, you know, it's kind of sort of happy sounding, and the song's about violence and depressing shit, but I dig that.
Right, doesn't he talk about like punching a woman in the face or something? Yeah.
No, that's fair. And I did pick it as my low point before I really read through the lyrics, just kind of breezing through the record. But yes, you make a good point that clash or that juxtaposition is kind of cool.
Well, it's kind of who they are. I mean, Stone Roses, that was their name to begin with. They like to do that.
What are we thinking about Stone Roses as a name? It feels a little...
Led Zeppelin.
I guess it's classic, but it's a little derivative.
It's not Third Eye Blind, so there you go.
Hold on, that's San Francisco's finest, Mike. How dare you?
Doot.
Kidding, of course. Let's move this right along to the next track.
Gotta love it.
How do we work more stones in? This is my favorite. This is an anthem, I feel. I think everyone's part individually is super interesting. They're each individually worth my ear following throughout the track, but I would say in particular this melody is just a really classic melody.
I like the lyrics on it, too. The whole part, the first part about it, where they're talking about Knuckles whitening on the wheel and the car wreck and everything. Supposedly that was inspired by Jackson Pollock himself, because he died in a car wreck when he hit a tree. But then again, they've also said it's about something else, too, so I guess it's whatever day you interviewed them on as to what the song was about.
That's the one, right?
KG Lads.
Yeah, I like this song a lot, and this song did get stuck in my head, I think, more than the other ones. John Squire has really nice guitar work on this one.
Yeah, definitely.
It is tasteful. It is rich. There's a little quibble that I have with it. The first verse comes in, and it's kind of... It's not halftime because it's just the song began. It's just the time. And then for the chorus, they kind of go to a double time feel, but he sort of brings in the double time like halfway through the first chorus. And I feel like for something like that, you got to let it steep a little bit before you jump into the double time. It just seemed like they rushed it a little bit much. And that to me seemed like maybe a more mature band would probably have waited and been a little bit more patient in the song. We've talked about this before. Like, patience is really hard.
You mean one that had been playing longer than 6 years?
Maturity comes not just from your time on the planet, I think, as we have all demonstrated at various points in our lives. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. These songs are kind of classically constructed. There's nothing crazily intricate about how they're put together, but each part just has its own little things. And so they do that classic thing where they shift from a minor seeming verse and open up into a major chorus.
Yeah.
It's nice. It feels good. It feels triumphant.
It does seem like they're allergic to bridges, though. I think there's like one song with a bridge in the whole album.
Yeah, you can't write a bridge in 6 years. Come on, man. I can only write 2 parts. You didn't give me enough time. Like,
Bye Bye Bad Man is the only one that has a bridge, and it's at the very end.
And it's not very good. It's a bit of a mess. I didn't get to my note there, but it's a bit of a sonic mess there.
I got it. They don't write bridges. They burn them.
Oh, there we go.
Done.
wow. And with that, we're going to move on to the next song, which is really 3 songs in one, called I Am the Resurrect.
I know. I'm like, this is good, but this is clearly 2 songs. Oh, no, wait. This is clearly 3 songs. What the hell, guys?
This was in competition for my favorite song. The very first time through the record, this is the one that really perked my ears up, especially or particularly when they start grooving in the second song of the three at around 3:40. It sounds the most like a live band. There's energy.
Yeah.
There's fun in that take. And if I had a complaint about the whole record, it might be that it comes off a little sterile at times. When you have a lead singer who's doing the slacker vocal thing, when you have everything washed over you. Yes, there's intricate parts, but it has a little bit of it doesn't feel very live to me. This one felt live.
Well, from what I understand, when they were recording, John Leckie kept tape rolling, and Manny, when they got to the end, just kept that bass groove going when they first went into the instrumental. And Leckie kept rolling, and they went into it, and they just did it. They just kept jamming, and then they added on the third part and the overdubs later. But it was just kind of a little freak of wonder, I guess, that they ended up with that part of the song, and it's glorious. It really is.
So specifically in that jammy part, I can hear some Guns N' Roses in there.
It rocks.
It's the only time I thought that on the record.
It's a little bit more distortion on the guitar too. It's a little heavier. Honestly, that was my favorite part of the album. And again, I'm not trying to talk shit on Ian Brown. I keep wanting to say Ian Curtis, Ian Brown, but it's because they're bringing an energy that they could not bring with him singing over it.
Oh, I gotcha. Right.
Like there's nothing for him to sing over that part of the song that would have fit. It's just not his style.
I hear you. I also have to, again, compliment them just on the title, on the lyrics. It's a bold title.
He went from I Want to Be Adored to I Am the Resurrection.
Oh.
It's confidence.
And it's not even that it's just I am the resurrection. He's telling the girl, you know what? I'm so damn cool. I could hate you if I really wanted to hate you, but I'm not going to because I'm the resurrection.
Did I also mention I have a great penis? Like,
Yeah, right.
what does this guy need to build himself up?
It will rise again. So I heard an anecdote that this song is based on playing the Taxman bass line backwards.
Oh.
Yes.
I didn't quite fact check that on my guitar, but it sounded like it could be correct.
Yeah.
One of my favorite parts to it is how it starts. I honestly thought this could have been a good introduction to the album as well, because it starts off with the drums. First Randy kicks in, and then Manny kicks in, and then Ian kicks in, and then John kicks in. It's like everybody gets a chance to say, here, I'm a Stone Rose, and this is what I'm doing in the band.
Yeah, it's an echo of the first song. That makes sense. But starting your album with a 10-minute jam track is probably not advisable.
It's not very business savvy, Rob. And if we know one thing about this band.
So
another bridge to burn. It would have worked for him.
Speaking of savviness, I think we've gabbed plenty here. We're going to throw it to a vote.
All right.
Tell me, is this a must listen before you die? Tom, tell me what you think.
So, Rob, this is one of those occasions where I came in thinking that I was going to say no. And I have now changed my vote to yes because of the context and because of how adored this is in the British music scene. I think that you should listen to it. I didn't not enjoy listening to it. I just was searching for the context. And now that I have the context, I can appreciate its impact on the culture, even if I can't necessarily draw direct musical threads. So I will say, yes, go ahead and listen to it. It is a pleasurable listen. It is not overly long. And so I think it's worth your time.
Awesome. Adam, what say you?
Yeah, this was an interesting week, coming in completely unaware of this. And even outside of the story, I could hear 90s in this. And I kept going back to that throughout the week as I was listening to it. So I think I can tie maybe a better line to the 90s than Tom can, but yeah, I think this was fun. This is good. I think this had an impact. And Rob, the story just helped too as to why did this appear on that list? And us sitting here in the U.S., a bit of a blind spot. So it's a yes for me. Yeah.
To further on what you said, Adam, not only why didn't this make it to the U.S., but why didn't they make more music? Like to hear about like they lost their shot to really capitalize.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you see a band like this and you're like, well, then why didn't they fucking do more if they were so great?
Right.
And you're like, okay, well, I guess I see why they didn't.
There's
do
a
more.
reason,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Indeed. Okay, well, that's 2 yes votes. Mike, I don't want to presume your vote. Why don't you tell us what your vote is and why?
Well, I think it might be pretty obvious from the way I've been talking about it. But yeah, it's definitely a yes for me. I've been listening to it since the week it came out. one of the very, very few Americans who know this album. And every time I get a chance to tell somebody about it, I do. And I'm really happy to have been able to share it with you guys because I do love the album. It's not the best album ever, but it is a personal favorite, and it means a lot to me. So to hear so far, don't know about you, Rob, that you two have liked it, it's cool. I really enjoy hearing that.
Nice.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, well, my vote no longer matters, but I shall give it to you anyway. This is Rob here. And listen, I had a very pleasurable week. I like the record. That is not in question at all. I can't say that it blew my mind, but reading about the story, it does feel like it is the beginning of something. It influenced a heck of a lot of people. So honestly, I'm happy to vote yes on this one. Feels like an obvious choice. I do think it's absolutely worth listening to, and of course it is a very pleasurable and fun album. I'll definitely listen to it again as well, but that's a little bit besides the point. I wanted to just bring up one more thing, which I really just thought about as we were finishing up our conversation, which is I've been trying to get my head around what the heck happened with this band. Yeah, they signed bad deals. Yeah, they got tied up in court. They had a bad manager. There was something else that was bothering me, and I think I figured it out. I think, this is speculation, there is no person in this band steering the ship. There's no boss of the band.
Oh, the band doesn't have a Rob.
It does not. You're sorely lacking a Rob. I agree.
That's a real good point. I've read that Manny and John Squire did some hanging out, but Rennie and Ian Brown were never to be found around the rest of them.
We're just talking about someone inside the band. Even if you're not handling the business side of the band, you're handling the musical side. You're driving the project forward. You have a vision. You're not only writing, but you're kind of pushing other people to write or expand their tastes. So again, that's speculation.
Should have been John Squire.
Probably should have been John Squire. And honestly, maybe it was. I am speculating, but in everything I read, I did not get that sense
No, you're right.
that they were super driven in that way. So I think that also has something to say about what happened with this band. And yet they have so little. We've given you this. We've welcomed you into our hearts here amongst the complainers. I'm sure people will still say we didn't like this record, but let me be loud and clear. I liked the record. You're on the list, baby.
Nice. Congrats.
Mike, I will tell you, when we first were throwing out this concept, there's a little hesitation because we're like, God, what if they pick just like absolute stinkers of records? Like, not that we don't have experience talking about them, but like, what are we going to do? Just like write to somebody's face, be like, your tastes suck and this album's terrible and I hate you. So thank you for not picking one of them.
There's still time, Tom. We might still get a chance to do that.
Yeah, there is still time. There is still time. Don't count your chickens before they hatch.
If that had happened, I would have just thought you were a middle schooler and treated you that way.
Yeah, I mean, you would be far off.
We don't isolate enough fans through the podcast itself. We have to bring them to us.
One at a time in it, yeah.
Do I get to see the Albinator soon?
Thank you for mentioning that, Mike. We have a couple things left to do before we pick the next album. First, Mike, I just want to give you a big, warm thank you for being game.
Yeah.
For supporting the Beverly Crushers enterprise and our Patreon community, everything you've done to get you here, and of course, coming on this show and picking this great record. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man. Awesome.
No, man. Thank you guys. I've had 2 knee replacements in the last year and a half.
Dude.
And this podcast is one of the things that, helped me get through it. Because when you're not allowed to walk anywhere,
Yeah.
you gotta find something.
And when you're on heavy painkillers recovering from surgery, we sound a lot funnier. Right. So that probably also helped too.
That's a good point.
It's all that Vicodin.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're going to look forward to more. We have 2 more listener request episodes this summer. We're working with those winners to figure out if they're going to come on the show or not. It's up to them, of course. But either way, our listeners will be picking those albums, and you'll be hearing those episodes later this summer. So we have one more thing to do before we get to the Albinator, which is dip into the old mailbag. And I have it here. I shall be dipping my hand in now.
Man, it's big.
First up, we have Damir writing from Stockholm, Sweden, about our
Nice.
ABBA episode. He says, Thanks for the episode on ABBA's The Visitors. Wonderful episode for an absolutely amazing album. Oh, he's a Swede and an ABBA fan. Who knew? As a huge ABBA fan, I'll provide you with a couple interesting tidbits that I think you'll appreciate. One, Polar Studios, the studio where they recorded the album, which ABBA's studio that they bought and made, was located right around the corner from where I live. Unfortunately, it's no longer around. However, ABBA the Museum in Stockholm, man, these guys know how to make money.
Damn.
Does have a recreation of this legendary recording location. However, I must tell you that the quirkiest exhibit at ABBA: the Museum surely has to be the self-playing piano, which is connected to Benny's piano at home and plays whenever he plays.
No.
That's fucking awesome.
That's awesome.
That is the coolest thing I've ever heard. Now I want to go
Right?
and
just
sit
wait.
by that piano and just wait, because that's what it would be
Yeah,
like.
Just sit there and watch until it starts playing.
Go to
amazing.
ABBA the Museum, which is like right next to ABBA the DMV.
Branding everything.
ABBA the liquor store.
Yeah, exactly.
He also goes on to give a couple other little tidbits. There's also an interesting connection to the Polar Music Prize, which was founded by Stig Anderson, who was ABBA's manager. There are 2 winners each year, one contemporary and one classical musician, and it's considered they're awarded 1 million Swedish kroner, roughly $100,000, for significant contributions to music, and they're presented the award by the King of Sweden in the same location where the Nobel Prize ceremony is held.
Wow.
It's been called the Nobel Prize of Music. Some notable winners: Paul McCartney, Quincy Jones, Ray Charles, and Robert Moog.
Nice.
And that was founded by Stig Anderson, and the name is after Polar Studios. A couple more short things regarding ABBA's wild stage costumes. Band members have gone on record stating that the reason for wearing them was because Swedish tax law allowed for deductions on clothing costs, but only if the clothing was deemed outrageous enough that they could not possibly be worn for everyday use.
Wow.
And lastly, you had to have been listening relatively closely to the episode to catch this one, so this maybe will be for Adam. But Rutger Gunnarsson is a wildly underrated bass player, and he sent along a clip of him being interviewed where he's talking about his basses and giving a tour of the studio, and then the Dancing Queen just starts playing, and he starts ripping a bass line over it out of nowhere.
Awesome. Go Gunnarsson. All right.
Anyway, thanks for the great work. Thank you, Damien.
Nice.
Hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. We appreciate all our fans, and I was hoping to hear from our Swedish fans about that ABBA episode. I got one more letter to read for you guys. This is Maya writing from New Jersey. Hey guys, I recently discovered your podcast. Did you hear that sigh, audience? That was the sound of a Delawarean knowing he's going to hear something about the state of New Jersey. I recently discovered your podcast. I've been binging episodes ever since. I think my favorite so far has to be Jimi Hendrix, though the Steely Dan one was a close second. You guys are hilarious and give me such a fresh perspective on music that I didn't grow up with. I had to laugh, in fact, at that hate comment saying your audience is made up of 40-year-old dads, because I'm 19 and I love the show.
Whoa. All right.
We're 40-year-old dads, so we just assume it's for us, right? I've shared it with so many of my friends who are also into what we call, affectionately, presumably, dad yacht rock. Your podcast has filled in so many gaps. I've discovered songs I'm almost embarrassed to admit I hadn't heard before. And I'm currently studying abroad in Berlin, and listening to the podcast gives me such a comforting sense of Americana. It's weirdly nostalgic in the best way, even for the songs I didn't grow up with. So thank you for making such an awesome show. P.S. Here it comes, Adam. I had to mention I'm from New Jersey after hearing all that Garden State slander in a recent episode.
It had to have been the Fugees episode.
It's our job. It's our job as Delawareans to make fun of our neighbor,
Surrounding
New Jersey.
states. Yeah.
I do wonder if hearing the mid-Atlantic accent with our elongated O's,
Right.
and she's living abroad in Germany, might be like a little, just a little slice of home, a little slice of home.
Home. I've worked so hard to get rid of that. I
I
swear.
know, me too.
I swear. Okay, but I'm sure it's still in there, no doubt. Well, that is the mailbag for this week. If you want to tell us anything about what we're doing right, what we did incorrectly, little tidbits and details about your personal connection to this music, or factoids about how these records were made. We'd love to hear about it. Send it all over to 1001albumcomplaints@gmail.com. And we have one last thing to do before we close out the show, which is Tom is going to spin Ye Old Albinator. It's got an extra E at the end now. and we're going to see what we'll be listening to next week. Tom.
Thank you, Rob.
Oh, man. This looks rough. Is it okay?
Well, it's been embezzling all of our funds recently. And so, it's like, I think justice is about to catch up with it. But let's see if we can squeeze one more album out of it. Without any further ado, drum roll, please. We will be listening to... The album is called Smash, and the band is The Offspring.
Oh, speaking of the 90s, baby.
I listened to this album recently on purpose, like within the last month.
I definitely own this.
I have a copy
If on vinyl. Wow.
Well, it's a new copy,
Okay,
not an
okay.
original.
Am I the only one who thought that guy sounds like Weird Al?
Yeah, it's got a little Weird Al.
I've ruined your week now listening to it. That's all I...
A little nasally, yeah. Let's see how he does in a polka first, and then we'll make our final judgment. Right.
Okay. Well, we hope you join us again next week for The Offspring's Smash. Again, thank you to Mike, our esteemed listener guest, for bringing us the Stone Roses.
Yeah,
we are going to
thank you.
sign off now. For everyone at the show, I have been Rob.
I'm Mike.
I've been Tom.
And I'm Adam.
Boosh.